So you want me to film you? Dude, what the fuck?
Snake.
It was 1994 when Kojima first started considering work for Metal Gear Solid. The game was originally going to be Metal Gear 3 for the 3DO. This is because at that time, Kojima was already working on Policenauts, which would release the following year on the 3DO, but because popularity of that console was waning for many reasons, development for Metal Gear Solid was soon shifted to the new Sony PlayStation console. Even before Metal Gear Solid, Kojima had been considering a remake of Metal Gear 1, but ultimately canned this idea once he realized he could just remake 2 and call it a new game, to take advantage of the opportunities afforded by the new PlayStation console. The Solid in Metal Gear Solid is both in reference to the eponymous Solid Snake, and also that the series was transitioning from 2D sprites to 3D models. Kojima and his team continued to work toward the same kind of realism they sought in Metal Gear 2, with the recurring adage from Kojima himself across several interviews at the time being, if players aren't tricked into believing that it's real, then there's no point in making it. This meant going as far as to consult with a SWAT team based out of Southern California and have an arms expert on their team in one Murtasada Mori. If you're not familiar with that name, a brief history is that he joined an artillery unit of the JSDF at the age of 19, and after a few years there, he joined the French Foreign Legion for a half-decade, before moving on to become the bodyguard of a Dalai Lama, and also helped to form Japan's counter-terrorism force. After this game, he would go on to be a regular part of Kojima's team for the bulk of the Metal Gear Solid series, because Kojima wasn't fucking around about the realism thing. According to artist Yoji Shinkawa, who worked on the character and mecha designs for the game, and would also be a mainstay contributor to the series from this point forward, Snake's physique was based on Jean-Claude Van Damme, while his face was based on Christopher Walken. Yeah, I didn't see it. In all, the team that worked on and completed Metal Gear Solid consisted of only 20 people, which for a game the size of Metal Gear Solid is insane, but also intentional. Kojima himself said that he preferred a small team as it let him have a more hands-on approach, know everyone in the team and what they were working on, and even if they were unwell or unhappy in any way, which is actually quite admirable, even by today's standards, considering how the industry traditionally regards its workers. The game was finally released in 1998, and at that point in my life it was the coolest fucking thing I had ever seen. I need to be clear, this is the game I've been looking forward to covering since I first started this channel. Wait, hang on, wait. Holy shit, it's been a year? Do we have anything to show for that? Oh. Yeah, look,
Heresy is not native to the world.
It
is but a contrivance.
Busy. Even though I wouldn't rank it as the best game in the series, it was my first introduction to the setting, characters, and big fucking robots. Because at that point in my life, I didn't know what 40k or Battletech were, and Transformers are fucking lame. I loved this game. Still love this game. And not only did I get to experience all of it at a time when it actually released, but also at a time in my life when I actually had spare time, a soul that hadn't yet been crushed by the weight of the modern world, and I didn't have the ever-watchful eye of a deranged AI parody watching my every waking moment. I couldn't tell you how many times I beat this game, and it stands as one of the greatest titles I've ever played, and it's probably one of the biggest reasons I enjoy gaming as much as I do today. So let's ruin it. Together. Metal Gear Solid is where a lot of changes to the first two games occur, which really shouldn't be surprising. Metal Gear is a series built upon retcons and retroactive storytelling, after all. I mean, not only did Metal Gear 2 rewrite the ending of Metal Gear 1 to say that NATO had bombed out of heaven, but its very existence negated everything that unfolded in Metal Gear 2 Snake's Revenge. Or did it? Because all things considered about this series, the possibility of an alternate timeline is very real. Before you even properly start the game, there's some lore and exposition to catch up on. There's the previous operations, which cover the major events of the first two games. Not as well as I did, of course.
Where does Snake end and where do I begin?
But succinctly enough for series newcomers to understand what's going on. Then there's the mission briefing, which sets things up for this game. Let's start with the previous operations and see what they do and or don't want us and or you to know. Probably. The opening lines of the Metal Gear file, or Operation Intrude N313, call Big Boss a lunatic, so we can be sure these aren't impartial documents, though admittedly the statement isn't inaccurate. Also, it is kind of poorly written, as in there's a few grammatical errors here and there, and it's awkward to read. I really hope this wasn't your work, translator Jeremy Blaustein, to whom we will get to in the fullness of time. For me, the most noticeable change was Jennifer being labeled as a member of the Resistance, and though it isn't explicitly said, I feel like it's implying she was among the Outer Heaven ranks. That feels like a downgrade to me. It was way more awesome when she infiltrated the fortress on her own and just started gifting Snake rocket launchers. The main changes to this game's story are Big Boss's motivations and reasons for what he did during the operation. See, while he was commander of Foxhounder, Big Boss also ran a private outfit on the side, started up by using capital and connections from his own years as a mercenary. Outer Heaven was supposed to serve as a foundation for a larger military establishment, while sending Snake was supposed to cause information confusion against the West, which I'm sure isn't as stupid as it sounds. On the 100th floor basement, the battle between the two men commenced, free of ideology or politics. Yeah, well, that's not true, but we'll get to that. It also confirms that Outer Heaven was destroyed via its own self-destruct mechanism, but doesn't mention anything about the NATO bombings, go figure. It's also weirdly silent about the outcome of Snake and Big Boss's fight, merely implying that Big Boss was killed, either by Snake or the collapsing base. The file for Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake, or Operation FO14, has much more information in it about both the events of that mission and the background history. For a start, Zanzibar Land was a democratic military regime that suddenly appeared in 1997, which narrows down the timeline we were working on before. So inside of 2 years, not 4, Big Boss either dies or is nearly mortally wounded before extracting himself, his remaining soldiers, sort of, we'll get to that, surviving resistance members and war orphans, and then migrates all of them to Central Asia, becomes a cyborg, and starts a banana republic. It also describes it as an uprising, so I guess chuck overthrowing an established government onto that pile. This was apparently seen unfavorably by neighboring states, as the CIS army, forming around Russia, went to war with the fledgling state. Zanzibar Land's army consisted of mercenaries from all around the world, and their combined might defeated the CIS. The role they played in the conflict led to it being referred to as the Mercenary War, and Zanzibar Land declared their independence following this victory. At this point, Zanzibar Land would become known as an armed fortress nation, a military nation with a group of strong mercenaries surrounded by a tough fortress. The file also makes Zanzibar Land's actions sound way more conspiratorial than outright hostile, and downplays the incompetence of the collective world government during this crisis. It acts coy about the identity of who could have kidnapped Marv, saying that an investigation had to be carried out just to turn up Zanzibar Land as a lead and not, Zanzibar Land just doing it loud and proud before holding the world hostage. And saying that latest information suggests that Zanzibar Land possesses nukes is a stark contrast to having the world's armies collectively pantsed and their nukes stolen by some mercs with a mech. By the way, Holly was a CIA agent, apparently, and these files still refer to Gustava as Natasha. Remember, that was the original name of the character before the localization of the game in 2004 and Metal Gear Solid released in 1999. Gustavo was also an ex-STB agent at the time of the operation, so I guess Czechoslovakia's secret police were cool with their agents just dropping out to take on private gigs. That whole speech she gave about being forced into becoming an agent for the secret police because she tried to defect, turns out that wasn't a big deal apparently, she could have left whenever she felt like it. The file describes the fight between Grey Fox and Snake as having taken place in a minefield, which, I mean, that's not inaccurate, but only in the same way that it's not inaccurate to call me a filmmaker, without hatred or murderous intent. Yeah, you know, other than it being a bare-knuckled fistfight to the death as a way to settle a toxic rivalry. Snake won the tough but pure battle, and look, you can dress it up however you want, but Snake literally beat Grey Fox until he exploded. Snake still confronts Big Boss in this version of events, but the speech that Big Boss gave is truncated down to largely omit his warmongering and completely remove any mention of the whole child soldier forever war plan. It also makes Snake sound way more aggressive than he actually was in that conversation. But the revised line is probably more accurate to what Snake is actually like. Let's not forget that across 2 sneaking missions alone, he's racked up a confirmed kill count of 15 to 19 people depending on how you count it. Significantly more if he's being controlled by me. Once again, the file is completely vague on Big Boss's ultimate fate, skipping from Snake screaming about killing him to Snake and Holly escaping in the chopper. It does make reference to Big Boss's last words, but considering it's the lines about the loser of the fight being freed from the battlefield, and not holy shit, oh god it burns, I'm genuinely worried this means he survived again and we're just not aware of it yet. I mean, he survived worse than this before he was a cyborg. The mission outline you hear during the opening cutscene of the game is actually just an abridged version of the full briefing that can be accessed in the main menu. It is very enlightening. Maybe too enlightening. See, I don't think I ever read the manual as a kid. We'll get to the manuals another time. Nor did I ever really watch these videos. Honestly, the first time I watched them was for this video you're watching right now. Though it's not the first time I'd seen some briefing videos.
I should have known you were behind this, Colonel. Snake. Snake.
Just not these particular ones. It has some details that verge on spoiling parts of the plot, at least as far as I would think. This is one of those moments that can change how you experience the game depending on what you carried with you in terms of prior knowledge. See, I didn't watch the full briefing when I first played Metal Gear Solid. In fact, I didn't know anything about the characters or the backstory at all outside of what you see after you hit new game. In some ways, I think that was actually the better way to play this game for the first time. Without retcons overriding details you already knew, it was easier to accept the sincerity of Metal Gear Solid's story and what it's trying to say. It was also easier to embrace the action movie feeling that Kojima was trying to create when you're not questioning everything. Over-explanation kinda kills that sort of fun, which is what this briefing does. So naturally, I'm gonna go through it in detail now. It's the year 2005 in the Metal Gear universe, and we're back again as Solid Snake, this time voiced by the legendary David Hayter. Snake has been retired from Foxhounder for some time now, having walked away from the unit after the Zanzibar land disturbance, living alone in the Alaskan wilderness. Colonel Roy Campbell, voiced by Paul Otis, which isn't his real name, has also retired. He left Foxhounder because he was apparently worried about the direction it was heading in, with operatives being genetically treated and enhanced. This is, of course, after Campbell set out to put the high-tech in high-tech Special Forces Foxhounder when he took over the unit. So really, this is just reaping what you sowed, dude. In his retirement, Campbell was serving as a special strategic instructor at a Marines boot camp, where he struck up a friendship with Master Miller. I assume before this they were just colleagues, strictly business. Also, did Shinkala farm this one out to Rob Liefeld? Because I mean, fucking look at him. In their absence, the unit kinda lost the plot, and during a training exercise on Shadow Moses Island, things went a little bit off the rails. The current day Foxhound unit decided to go rogue, taking control of the facility they were stationed in, which is located just off the coast of Alaska in the Fox Archipelago, because of course it is. The next generation Special Forces are also working together with the rogue Foxhound unit, which is a big problem we'll get into a bit later. The even bigger, more immediate problem is that Shadow Moses is a nuclear storage and disposal facility. They've given a deadline of 24 hours, after which they'll fire a nuke, and really, the target doesn't actually matter, because if you're even passingly familiar with game theory about how to respond to a nuclear strike, you know that as soon as that rocket hits sky, then we're all fucked. Their single demand is the remains of Big Boss, which is gross and weird and urgently needed for their survival, but we'll get into that later. The rogue Foxhound unit are branded terrorists by the US government, and of course a response is required because I mean fuck, they're stealing nukes on US soil. They probably couldn't just steamroll the base with the might and sheer numbers of what was, even in 2005, the over-bloated and excessive US military-industrial complex. The whole radicals in possession of active nuclear weapons thing just makes the situation a whole lot more complicated. Moreover, the news of terrorists obtaining a weapon on US soil, were such news ever to get out, would make things uncomfortably awkward for the US for both the obvious reasons and reasons that we'll get into much later. Instead, a more surgical solution was opted for, and I assume both because of his experience with the unit and probably because they literally couldn't find anyone else on such short notice, Campbell was pulled back in from retirement to handle the situation. Knowing that he could get shit done, Campbell's first order of business is to pull Snake out of retirement, by which I actually mean had Snake forced from his home at gunpoint and into the sub. Snake didn't even know who'd done it.
It's been a long time, Snake.
I should have known you were behind this, Colonel.
That's no way to greet an old war buddy, Snake.
What do you want from me?
I just invited you here so we could have a talk.
Invited? That's what you call sending armed soldiers after me?
Snake.
You have two mission objectives. The first is to rescue the hostages, DARPA Chief Donald Anderson and Arms Tech President Kenneth Baker, and the second is to find out if the terrorists do have the capability of firing a nuke and stopping them if they do. So hang on, let me get this straight. There's only 2 hostages that are mentioned? That can't be right. What about the janitorial, admin, maintenance, and specialist, basically any non-military staff that would have been working on the site? Is this terrorist plot so deep that every last person on Shadow Moses revolted as a single cohesive group? Nah, they're probably just dead. As an explanation for why Donald Anderson and Kenneth Baker were present on the site at the time of the revolution, the Colonel tells Snake that there were secret exercises being conducted when the attack occurred. What kind of exercises?
Were they testing some kind of new advanced weapon?
I'm not privy to that information.
The secret kind. Naomi tells you that the DARPA chief should show up on your radar because he's been injected with a mini transmitter. Oh cool, are you still putting it in their teeth? That was pretty effective the first time, even if it didn't pan out the way it was supposed to. Maybe if we don't have a traitor amongst us this time? The Colonel also says that the threat is credible because
They even gave us the serial number of the warhead they plan to use.
So whether or not they can actually use it, we know the terrorists have a nuke. There's a safety override.
But even so, we can't rest easy.
Why not?
Because the DARPA chief knows the detonation code.
The briefing goes into detail about why they're using the chosen insertion method, which is a whole thing.
We'll approach the disposal facility by sub.
And then?
We'll launch a one-man SDV.
And then?
From there on, you'll have to swim.
And then?
Don't expect any official support.
And then? Colonel.
And Snake even summarizes the situation and then says,
Sounds like a spy movie.
which almost makes it sound like he's self-aware. I mean, you do remember what you did in the last 2 games, right? Also, the briefing is separated out into these little video files. Some longer than others, but some are pretty short.
What's the time limit?
24 hours. They say they'll launch after 24 hours.
Do they say what the target will be?
So far, they haven't mentioned the target.
When did the countdown start?
5 hours ago.
Oh yeah, you actually only have 19 hours to get it done, Snake, so have fun with that. Maybe it'd be more if it weren't so difficult to find you, you hermetic murder hobo fuck. The Colonel says that he's representing the US government, and that the POTUS has supervisory control of the operation because the COG hasn't been issued yet. This is because the Secretary of Defense has operational control, which is different and distinct from supervisory control of the operation, and a COG won't be issued until the launch capabilities of the terrorists have been confirmed. The government has yet to move to the bunker underneath Mount Washington, and the NSA and DIA are both working on this. If you're
Starting to get a bad feeling about this.
then don't worry. Literally none of this has an impact on the game's story. It only has massive implications for the series as a whole. There's some introductions of your support staff, including Naomi.
Dr. Naomi Hunter. She's chief of Foxhound's medical staff and an expert in gene therapy.
Don't worry, this injection won't hurt a bit.
What's the shot for?
What's wrong? You don't like shots?
There's some back and forth with Naomi, who Snake generally treats as though she's not in the room until it's time to give the US military's HR guidelines a test.
You mean you've seen them naked?
Make no mistake, I'm not a nurse. I'm a scientist.
Yeah, I'll remember that.
By the way, what was that injection for?
She tells you that the shot is a combination of nanomachines and an anti-freezing peptide, so Snake's body doesn't freeze during the mission, but we'll come back to that injection. The Metal Gear series, over time, develops an interesting relationship with and understanding of nanomachines in general, but as far as this game goes, they're basically just keeping Snake alive. You're also introduced to Nastasha Romanenko for the first time, a nuclear weapons specialist who has previously worked as an advisor to Nest and is an expert in high-tech weapons. She's supporting Snake remotely from her home in Los Angeles.
California. Seems like a million miles away.
Snake, why are you talking about California like it's some halcyon dream? You were already in Alaska because you fucking retired there. By choice. Twice. It's come to my attention since I originally recorded this episode that after the events of N313, Snake actually retired to the Canadian wilderness, not Alaska. He only retired to Alaska after the events of FO14. But the point is still the same. Snake traded one frozen wilderness for another that was even further away from California. Snake, you asked for this. Despite the fact she's probably the most invaluable source of information on a mission involving a hijacked nuke, you're not given her codec number from the start like you would be with others, and honestly you never really need to even speak to her again. It's unfortunate that a lot of the information she gives you doesn't have a better place in the narrative. Considering how often everyone else just sort of barges into active codec calls, you'd think that she could have been included in at least some of the more pertinent conversations around nuclear weapons and materials. And all Snake can manage when hearing about her is...
A female analyst?
Christ, Snake, why do you always have to do this? You realize that almost your entire support team are women now, right? Can you contain yourself for the next 19 hours? But if you call her shortly after the mission starts, she gives a pretty lengthy background of the current global nuclear situation, and who would have thought, it's really fucking grim.
Most people think that we live in a safer world now. Start to Accord was signed, but with all the dismantled nuclear weapons and waste around, January 3rd, 1993, but they could not stop dismantling weapons while at the same time pushing Start 2. When you dismantle a warhead, you still have nuclear materials that must be stored. Reduce their strategic nuclear warheads to between 3,000 and 3,500 warheads each. Over 200 tons of plutonium. There are over 15,000 dismantled nuclear warheads waiting to be disposed of. 1,000 tons of high-grade uranium. As of the year 2005, America alone was storing over 50,000 tons of nuclear material. The threat of nuclear terrorism has increased tremendously. All over the world continue to produce and leak spent nuclear fuel. There is no room left in our nuclear material storage sites, but there are limits to how many warheads they can process. We just do not have the capabilities to dismantle all the warheads that are out there.
So, remember in the last game how I said the world was backing away from nuclear proliferation and beginning to disarm en masse? That no longer gelled with where the world was actually heading, and being an adult with functioning eyes and ears, Kojima clearly saw this and adjusted the series' narrative accordingly. Global nuclear disarmament was an idea written for a simpler, less terrifying time. That time, of course, being the late 80s through to the end of the 90s. Having grown up in a developed Western nation during that period, I can honestly say it might be the closest we've ever come to idyllic, though that's not the praise you might think it is. But in those days, there was a feeling that ridding the world of nuclear weapons was something that could be achieved. And I mean, it was definitely less terrifying than right now, that's for fucking sure. Because I mean, sure, throughout the Cold War, people lived under the constant threat of sudden nuclear annihilation. The key words there, though, are threat and sudden, not unflinchingly inevitable and horrifically slow death of the human race. If things had gone sideways during the Cold War, it may very well have been the end of humanity at that point as well, but at least it likely would have ended quickly. Meanwhile, I'm stuck here making retirement plans to die in the upcoming resource wars of the late 2020s. The The present-day Foxhound unit currently consists of 6 members. There's Psycho Mantis, a telepathic and telekinetic shadow of his former self, but that's just my assessment, we'll get to that. Sniper Wolf, and of course the first described trait of hers is her beauty, because Kojima's gonna Kojima, and he Kojima's a lot in this game, let me fucking tell you. Decoy Octopus, a master of disguise and all-around nobody for the most part, despite being one of the most important parts of the story, because again, we'll get to that. Vulcan Raven, giant and shaman. No, I'm not kidding, that's how the game describes him. And they're not joking about him being giant either. In fact, let me just fix this. Revolver Ocelot. And that's all you need to know about him right now. And finally, they're led by Liquid Snake, a soldier with the same codename as you because foreshadowing is a thing. We'll get to him in a moment. So the hostages have the keys needed to disarm the nukes, assuming that the rogue Foxhound team haven't gotten hold of them first because
The 6 members of Foxhound in charge are all hardened veterans. They're tough enough to eat nails and ask for seconds.
yeah, okay, Colonel Boomer, they sound really scary. The rest of the terrorist force is made up of the Next Generation Special Forces, a heavily armed force of genetically altered soldiers. The NGSF started out as an anti-terrorist special ops unit consisting of former members of biochem units, technical escort units, and the Nuclear Emergency Search Team. They were formed specifically to deal with threats that involved next-gen WMDs, including NBC weapons. Then, at some point after the unit was formed, Operation Intrude N313 occurred. Despite bombing the absolute shit out of Outer Heaven to make sure it and everyone in it was utterly destroyed, the US government apparently liked the pluck of those mercenaries that survived.
Most of them were from a merc agency that I think you're familiar with. They were part of Big Boss's private guard.
Outer Heaven.
The US government bought out their contracts, bringing them into the army and eventually folding them into the NGSF. Naomi points out that they've been genetically strengthened, with selected genetic traits to make them better soldiers.
I thought using genetically modified soldiers was prohibited by international law.
Yes, but those are just declarations, not actual treaties.
Oh, the person upon whose DNA the alterations for the NGSF were based is the same person whose remains they're demanding from the US government.
You don't mean Big Boss.
That's right.
Apparently after Zanzibar land, Big Boss's body was recovered by the US government, who've been keeping it on ice ever since. Look, I'm not saying we should sign Snake up as a guinea pig or something, but you understand that Snake killed Big Boss, right? Hell, he killed Big Boss twice. Why aren't you sticking him for his soldier essence? After all having been through the same gene therapy, the soldiers now feel like family, and what the US government is calling a revolt, they're calling a revolution. Not every NGSF soldier was happy to participate, with some not showing up on the day, but the rest showing unanimous support for sedition. Likely due to the genetic connection and the influx of former Outer Heaven soldiers, the collective of the NGSF and Foxhound are now referring to themselves as the Sons of Big Boss. As far as I've seen, this doesn't actually come up again until way later in the game, with the collective often just being referred to as the terrorists. Oh yeah, minor detail, apparently every single one of the NGSF are 180 IQ geniuses and they've been conducting their own genetic experiments. Foxhound, following the tradition of awful decisions, automated their genetic manipulation technology and then put it within reach of their super strong, super intelligent super soldiers. All these narrative points around genetic manipulation and using it to manufacture perfect soldiers tie back into one of the biggest themes of the game, maybe the biggest theme of the series. Do our genes or our experiences define who we are as people? Naomi even lays it out, saying they believe that good soldiers are more reliably produced when you're able to provide them with inherited genetic traits preferable to soldiering, rather than through experience or training alone. We'll talk about all of this later as it comes up again. But for now, just think of it as eugenics good, maybe?
I'll be frank. A person very dear to me is being held hostage.
Who is it?
My niece, Meryl.
This is also technically the first time you hear about the Colonel's niece, Meryl Silverberg. For anyone that played Kojima's previous title, Police Noughts, this name would have sounded familiar, but they're totally separate characters. In that title, which is set in 2040, Meryl assists the protagonist as a 24-year-old cop in the Vice Unit. She came to Beyond Coast, the space colony that the game takes place in, seeking action after having left her old unit, High-Tech Special Forces Unit Foxhound. God damn it, I'm gonna have to play this at some point too, aren't I? No, I'm sure that's not actually what that means. Things do not get better for you. At 18, Meryl was one of the emergency replacements called to fill in for the soldiers that went missing on the day of the revolt at Shadow Moses Island. This means she's not NGSF, but I guess also that means she's not regular army? Her file, shown in the briefing, also says that she's been trained via VR combat simulation and has received psychotherapy so she isn't attracted to those of the opposite sex. Okay? Is that something every soldier gets, or was Meryl a special case for some reason? And only the opposite sex? She's still cool to get down with the ladies? I just want to know what the reasoning here is, Kojima. Campbell says she was the daughter of his little brother, and after her father died in the Gulf War, he's been watching out for her.
Personal motive, Colonel. That's not very soldierly.
I'm retired. I'm just an old man now. And I'm your friend.
Fuck off, Colonel.
Since when are we friends?
I've thought of us as friends since the fall of Zanzibar.
Colonel Snake came out of retirement from the wilderness from Operation FO14, and then went straight back there afterwards. He literally slipped out the back of the room while mid-conversation with you, and then broke contact for 6 years. What part of that made you think you were friends?
With my personality, I don't have too many friends.
Oh, thank God, he is self-aware. Snake agrees to save Meryl, but he has 2 conditions. The first is that he wants full disclosure from the Colonel at all times, and, yeah, we'll see how that works out for you, buddy. The second condition is that Snake will only accept orders directly from the Colonel. At this point, the Colonel confirms that he isn't actually a Colonel anymore. He really is retired.
I understand, Colonel.
What? No, Snake, he just said... And finally, the briefing comes back around to the topic of Liquid Snake, at least as far as one major plot point is concerned. This is where the briefing starts to undermine the plot of the game, so if you're the kind of person that hates spoilers, then I don't care. Liquid Snake is the leader of the Rogue Foxhound unit, a former elite soldier since he was practically a child, and is yet another stupid security decision by Foxhound. See, after serving as a sleeper agent for the SAS, Liquid was captured and disappeared for a number of years. Eventually, he just resurfaced, and not long after that was just taken in by Foxhound. Just to reiterate, he was captured by enemy forces for years, and then just turns up again with no wounds at all, no real explanation on file for where he's been the whole time, and the response to this is to just make him the leader of a secret crack team of Black Ops weirdos? Yeah, that's fine, I don't see how that could go wrong at all. Oh, way! Apparently Liquid's real name is so highly classified, not even Campbell can look at it, and Snake remarks that by the time he'd left the unit, soldiers had stopped taking codenames. In other words, Liquid went out of his way to not only use a codename system that wasn't being used anymore to cover up his secret identity, but he also took on the same codename as Solid Snake. And finally...
Here's a photo of him. Pretty shocking, huh? His skin tone is different, but otherwise you two are exact duplicates.
I have a twin?
I don't know the details, but it seems so.
Oh yeah, it's fine. I'm sure that's only a minor detail at best.
That's why we really need you for this mission.
You're the only one who can beat him. Now that I've met you, I know. You've got something that he doesn't. I can see it in your eyes.
Why don't I find that thought more comforting?
Maybe because that's complete horse shit? You need me for the mission because I look like the terrorist leader? What does that have to do with anything? Why should I even take this mission?
Colonel, I don't work for the government anymore. Let me go back to Twin Lakes.
Why, Snake? Is your life in Alaska all that great?
There's a dog sled race this week. Next Saturday, I have to be in Anchorage.
Iditarod, the longest sled race in the world? When did you become a dog musher?
Right now, my 50 huskies are my only family. I've got to take care of them.
Don't worry about your dogs.
What do you mean?
I'm sorry, Snake.
Dude, you killed his fucking dogs? There were 50 of them! That's monstrous!
Snake, there's enough dirt in your file from your days as an agent to keep you in the stockade until you're a very old man.
Oh yeah, blackmail me, kill my dog, sure, that's fine. Have you seen John Wick, Colonel? Also, you might want to have a word with Naomi. You know, she said there was something in my eyes that she can't quite put words to, but did she forget or something? Because I mean, she put it there.
I also put some nootropics in there.
Say what?
nootropics. A class of drugs which will help improve your mental functioning.
You'll make me smarter, huh? Second floor basement. Am I too late? Surveillance camera? How'd you do it?
What's going on?
Second floor basement.
Cold bad feelings. Something you ate?
Second floor basement. Anything else?
Yes, Benzedrine. It's a type of stimulant. It'll keep you alert and responsive for 12 straight hours.